Hello there. I'm here to show you a wonderful place. You can be a hero by purchasing a residence in a Vault-Tec vault today. Because if the worst should happen tomorrow, the world is going to need you to build a better day after.
Fallout is considered in some circles within the gaming community to be one of the greatest video game series of all time, and as someone like myself who used to call themselves a gamer, I have unfortunately never played the game. I know that's blasphemy, it's crazy, it's insane, but that didn't stop me from reaching out to Prime Video for early access to the entire season, in which I have seen, and that's why we're here today to talk about the series from the perspective of someone who hasn't played the game. Is the show's story any good? Are the characters likable? Is this the next big show on television? And do we need more seasons to explore this world? Well, we'll be discussing that and much more in today's review of Prime Video's Fallout. But first, I want to hear from my gamers and non-gamers about your expectations and your excitement level for this series. But more importantly, once you've seen all 8 episodes, what did you think overall? Tell me your favorite moments, favorite characters, the plots that intrigued you the most. What were some things that didn't work for you all? And do you want more seasons of this show? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, I've seen the entire season 1 and I'll be keeping most of this review spoiler free, but I might venture into spoilers when we're discussing the ending towards the back half of this video, so I'll make it known when I'll talk about the spoilers and when we'll begin that spoiler talk. But with that being said, let's get into my thoughts. Starting off with the premise and who's behind the scenes of bringing this show to life. Now again, this show was based on the popular video game series Fallout, but the show created a brand new story and also brand new characters within the world of the Fallout series, and this story is all about the haves and have-nots in a world in which there's almost nothing left to fight for. As within the world of Fallout, there's this apocalyptic nuclear event that takes place, and we see the survivors took refuge in a Fallout bunker known as the Vaults, which were built to preserve humanity in the event of a nuclear annihilation. Now that brings us to the present timeline of this story, which is 219 years later, as we see a young woman leaves behind her home in Vault 33 to venture off into a dangerously brutal and hostile, savage and unforgiving wasteland of the devastated Los Angeles to find her father. Now, first thing for me, I was very impressed by the world building and the massive scale of this show. Although the showrunners Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy and the directors of the show did a really good job of taking its time and really showing us these different places, these different groups of people, and watching them inhabit this new world. I really enjoyed the aesthetic of the show, especially from the perspective of the people that found themselves in the vaults, as it has this very retro futuristic society design and make them feel as though they're from the 50s and they're acting like they're nuclear families from the way they act and the way they behave. Honestly, the entire aesthetic was quite impressive from this show, from spending time with the people in the vaults, as they call them, the vault dwellers, to eventually venturing off to the outside and seeing the different styles of groups, from the Brotherhood of Steel to other survivals, and how they're approaching this world. I only had seen one trailer for this show, and I think it was more of a Green Band trailer in this approach in telling the story. So I say that to say I didn't know that this show had a more mature and violent elements, but after episode 1, I was blown away by the sheer violence of this show, because I had no idea how bloody and gory this show would get.
Holy shit, you're an actual vault dweller.
I am. I thought all you dipshits were dead.
As it plays within this world, almost reminded me of like Mad Max in its style and its design. But again, the actual violence and the level of violence of these mutated creatures and how people treat each other was very surprising. Now, performance and character-wise, I thought that everyone was solid for the most part, but my personal standouts were Ella Purnell as Lucy McLean, a young vault dweller and the primary person that we follow throughout the series, as well as Walton Goggins as the Ghoul, also known as Cooper Howard, who is a mutated gunslinger and a bounty hunter who has been alive since before the bombs fell. Lucy and Cooper are the complete opposite of one another, and that to me created such a fun and interesting dynamic. I really enjoy watching Lucy's journey, as she was someone in the show that always wants to see the best in people and also wants to trust everyone she comes across, and just seeing how she was able to eventually adapt to the surface land was very entertaining. Switching over to the Ghoul, played by Walter Goggins, who had so much swag and was such a badass bounty hunter. He's someone that's seen the worst in humanity, and when you cross paths with those characters, again, to me, that was easily the best dynamic in the show, and it was some of the best storylines storylines and best acting that the show had to offer, in my opinion. Now, as far as the storylines and the themes go, the show has some interesting ideas that it explores as it deals with what happens when the world is destroyed by its own people and how does it reset itself. The idea behind the Vault Dwellers was so interesting, but the secrets held by the Vault-Tec being a system of corporate greed and deception and how all the different people have their own idea of how to save the world was something I found handled well in the show. And I would say as far as the pacing goes, the show starts off in a really strong way. Like I found episodes 1 and 2 to be very compelling, very interesting, set the groundwork for a really interesting story. The ending really picks things up because, as I'll talk about later, the middle portion of the story kind of drops in quality. But again, I like a show that can start off well. It dips down in quality in the middle, but it definitely ends on a pretty high note. So just recapping the things that really stood out to me, I thought the world building was handled well. I really enjoyed the aesthetic of the show, the look, the feel, the sound design, the performances from Lucy and Cooper were some of my favorites. And again, I can't stress enough how unexpectedly fun the entertaining violence was of this show. Those were some really big standouts to me. But transitioning into my criticisms, the show definitely has its different tones that it offers. It can be very wacky, very goofy, but also serious at times, but ultimately it didn't always mix well for me. I'll use the Brotherhood of Steel for example. Now, I never felt their presence was one of fear or policing the wasteland. They are the collectors and they preserve technology, and I just thought that the character Max that we follow, to me, he was just too awkward and too unsure of himself. Now, I might be in a minority, but I just hated the look of their suits. I felt like it was just a person in a plastic suit. I always prefer practicality over visual effects, but the design to me of the Brotherhood of Steel to me was just bad. But on that note, the action that came with the Brotherhood was lackluster, especially when you compare it to all the cool scenes we got with the gunslinger, the Ghoul. But back to the character Max, I felt Lucy occupied that fish out of water character well, and every time we would cut to him, it just felt too similar to what they were doing with Lucy. Whenever we spent time with him as a squire trying to become a knight, and his whole side quest, everything with the romantic angle that they applied to him and Lucy, to me just didn't work. There's no fault of the actor, I just wasn't a fan of how they wrote that character Max. Which brings me to another issue I have with the series, and that was the mystery of the vaults. Now, no spoilers, but the particular plot involving Norm, who was Lucy's brother, and her cousin who's in love with her, them trying to uncover the secrets of the purpose of the vaults were just some of the weaker elements of the storytelling. It was just too cheesy and it tried too hard for me. Obviously, comedy's subjective, but all the jokes in the vaults with them just being kind of awkward just wasn't working. Now, the horrific opening of the vaults was good. Once you learn about the other vaults, that stuff was a little bit more intriguing, but most of everything, minus Lucy and her dad, but everything involving Vault 33 just wasn't my type of storytelling. Now, bringing it back to the middle section of the show, episodes 3, 4, and 5, to me were the weakest. The whole mission involving the hunt of the scientist and the item in which that scientist had, that became very uninteresting to me. Now, luckily, it was replaced by Cooper's backstory and Lucy becoming more aware of her surroundings and knowing what it's going to take to survive on the surface land. That picked up the narrative. But while we were trying to find out the scientist, learn about what was in that particular part of his body, and all the stuff surrounding that, to me just wasn't as entertaining as I think the show thought it was. Which I honestly didn't feel like all the plots tied together well in a satisfying manner. The mystery of the Vault-Tec took too long to explain to me. And last note I'll mention is the show to me didn't do a good enough job of really truly exploring the fear of the surface land, which I'm sure they'll explore more in an inevitable season 2 because I think the show's going to do well. But I just thought that there was a missed opportunity to maybe explore more groups, more creatures, but it never just seemed like it was all that scary on the surface land as the show trying to make it out to be. Now, those are my main pros and cons, and before I give you all my overall thoughts of this season and we get into a little bit of spoiler territory, I want to take the time to thank you all for making it to this point in the review. If you haven't already, consider hitting the like button, sharing your thoughts on this first season in the comments below, but as well as sharing this video, and also consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. So overall, I enjoyed the world building and seeing how people managed to survive. Seeing characters like Lucy and Cooper were great to me, and I really enjoyed their performances. Like I mentioned earlier, they were the standouts of the show. They were the best characters and had the best storylines. I just thought that they were flat out the saving grace of the show. Now, the supporting characters, like I said, for the most part, I didn't mention all the supporting characters because I don't want to spoil too much, but when I think of characters like Norm and Vault 33 and all the characters that are surrounded in that vault, to having characters like Max and everything attached to the Brotherhood, and the tonal inconsistency in the middle portion of this show is what brings my score down. But overall, it was still very entertaining for a season 1. Coming from someone that's never played the game, I'm going to give season 1 of Fallout a 7 out of 10. Now, before we wrap this up, I did want to talk a little bit about the spoiler territory and the idea of what can happen in a season 2. Not sticking too long on this, but as far as the ending went, after we see Lucy learning about her father being responsible for killing her mom, who became a ghoul, and Max now officially becoming a knight, I'm excited to see Cooper and Lucy find, as he calls their makers, because I'm assuming that his wife is probably still alive, and it sounds like his daughter might be alive as well, as I assume that their bodies were frozen like Norm found in Vault 31. So it's going to be interesting to see like what was it that actually broke them up, because as we know it, he spied on her. He heard what she said about how they were the ones, the Vault Tech were the ones that released the nuclear bombs. So I'm just very interested to see how he approached that conversation. Did she try to kill him from finding out what he did? Really interested to see that family dynamic, but also interested to see who else are in those vaults. But getting more of Lucy's story, how is she gonna handle her father who survived at the end of this show? Seeing her brother Norm, who, like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but hopefully he's gonna get a more mature, more serious storyline when it comes to season 2. So all in all, I'm excited to see what they do with season 2. I'm sure the video game fans are gonna love to see more Easter eggs, more of the characters from the game. So I would anticipate that season 2 will probably, based on the production value of this first season, won't be around to probably 2026 at the earliest, but whenever it comes out, I'll be checking it out. So that are my pros and my cons of this first season of Fallout. Like I said, a 7 out of 10 overall, with some shortcomings in some of the supporting characters and not really exploring some elements I would have liked to explore a little bit more, but a fun time overall. Those are my thoughts. I want to talk to you in the comments. Pros, cons, favorite characters, favorite episodes. What were some things that as a video game fan that you really appreciated? Or if you were like me, like a non-video game player of this particular IP, what were some things that really stood out to you? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Really appreciate you all watching my review of the Fallout Season 1. I would really appreciate it if you can give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, consider subscribing to the channel. You all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown. We'll be right back.